Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the results from the 2004 box tournament that I held last Saturday. I can't believe the support the community gave this tournament, and I also can't believe how much fun I had putting this on. Before I jump too much into the video here, I do want to say a thank you to Zaya Lee. I was a little bit familiar with the Limitless program, and I felt like I would be able to run this tournament okay, but at the start of it, I definitely struggled. Zaya stepped up and essentially ran a majority of the tournament himself, and then let me focus on the commentary and making sure we're having good coverage for the event. So I would like to say it's a great team effort between the two of us, but this event certainly would not have ran as smoothly without Zaya. Now, I think for this video, because there was a lot of really cool decks that made the top 8, but then I also think there was a lot of really cool decks that were played in the event. So I think I'm actually going to try to do like a two-part video here. For this first one, I'm just going to cover a lot of the top 8 results, and then I'm going to do a separate video to talk about some of the other cool decks that were in the field that just fell a little bit shy of making top 8. But over the course of, for this tournament, we gave out over $160 in prizes. I talked with Robin earlier on in the week, and essentially he's going to order a box from Germany, and I PayPal'd him the money for it. So the box is already settled with Robin. The trophy cards are going to go out probably early next week. There's going to be 4 for the first through 4th place, and then there's going to be 2 staff, one for Zaya and then one for Evan, who joined me on commentary for the top 8. If you haven't done so already, make sure to check out the Twitch commentary for the event. It was just an absolute blast to hang out with everybody all afternoon and just watch some really great games of Pokemon. But let's go ahead and just jump right on into it here. Top 8 results here. I'm just going to put them up on the screen, and then we'll break down the top 8 deck list a little bit more. But before we do that, just some interesting statistics. We had 31 total players in the event. 16 different archetypes were brought to the tournament. Players from 10 different countries competed. Among the competitors, there was 4 World Championship victories, 2 U.S. National victories, and more Worlds invites than I bothered to count between just those 31 competitors. So while I think having a huge event would have been awesome, I would have loved to like have 64 players do like a top 16 or something like that. Just the sheer quality of the players that we that came and showed up on Saturday was just unbelievable. So I'm thinking we got a really good, not only event, but we also got a pretty accurate picture on how the metagame is shaping up a little bit. And then there was also in the event, there was nobody showed up with Shiftry, Machamp, or Swampert. I guess the Machamp I shouldn't be that surprised about, but the Shiftry and Swampert does surprise me. I thought at least somebody would have the guts to bring those, and to be honest with you, I actually think Swampert's a tier 1 deck too, so that missing completely from the tournament was definitely a shocker for me. Top 8 statistics. We had 5 different countries were represented in the top 8. There were 3 Magma decks played in the tournament. All 3 of them made the top cut. Both Blaziken lists ran ATM Rock and 2 Ditto. Only 3 of the top 8 decks contained Pokemon EX, which is actually a pretty big shift from what we've seen not only in the past tournaments from like the Pokestat tournament last year, but also definitely from what we saw in 2004. And then 5 decks in the top 8 had a flip a coin card in them. That was just my own personal statistic. I found that kind of interesting that even players were definitely willing to play those high risk, high reward cards. Now, jumping into the top 8 deck lists here, we're just going to do a quick rundown of them. Robin ultimately won the event playing Team Magma. He went 8-1. The one loss he actually had, he skipped the round. He was supposed to play Jason Klaczynski, which I think would have been an unbelievably great game, but he had some personal stuff he had to take care of, but missed the round, jumped right back in the following round, and didn't miss a beat with it. Now, just doing a quick rundown of the deck here, I think his Pokemon line and his energy line are perfect. His energy is very high at 18, and he had to make a lot of cuts in the trainer lineup to fit that in, which we'll take a look here in a bit, but he had literally everything that you would want in this deck. He had the 6 fighting and then the 2 rainbows played really well. So he had 8 opening fighting energy. The 1 fire I think is essential, and then he did play the 1 psychic too for the Claydol. The rainbows can obviously be a little bit of a double-edged sword with Gorebyss, as can the Psychic Energy be. But if there was something like, what do you want for your energy lineup? That's, I think, exactly what you'd want for a Team Magma deck. But what happens is, in the trainer lineup, he did have to make some cuts here. I think he had some really interesting innovations as well. The main one being that 4 Pokemon reversal. Out of the 3 Magma decks, 2 out of the 3 played 4 reversal. And to be honest with you, I think that's right. It's something that I think maybe I definitely should have considered with my list, and I probably should have played, was the 4 reversals. I think in the main line of thinking with that, and one of the main reasonings is that not only do you have to be able to counter Blossom with, let's say, like a Camera Up and Fire Energy, but you got to be able to proactively deal with it. And you see that a lot, like in the Blaziken matchup, where they'll just retreat between Ruby Sapphire Blazikens and use Heal Dance, stuff like that. You need to be able to not only reversal up like a damaged Blaziken to knock it out, but also reversal up a Blossom and then proactively deal with it and not try to reactively deal with it. The other thing was, and this is something I liked, I did with my list too, was just the 3 Brinies Compassion. I was not a huge fan of the Switch or Warp Point, anything like that. Just 3 Brinies was so good. And then playing the 4 Conspirator, 3 Team Magma Ball, I think just gives you so much consistency with the deck. The only thing that I don't like about Robin's list, and I'm going to say I really disagree with, is I think in this format, you have to max Stevens and Copycat. 4 Stevens and 4 Copycat, I think, are just an absolute must. And we saw kind of throughout the top 8, especially in that finals game when we watched Robin, that he did dead draw a little bit. And I think that goes to show because he only had those 11 draw supporters in the deck. And I get with Magma, it gets a little awkward because you're playing those like Conspirator and Compassion, which are supporters, but they aren't really like consistency supporters. But yeah, I think 4 Stevens and 4 Copycats absolutely essential. Maybe you can cut down on, I think a lot of non-Claydol, I think a lot of non-Delcatty decks play. I like 14, 15 supporters. Maybe because of Conspirator and some other stuff, you can cut that down. Maybe like 13, 14, something like that. But yeah, I definitely think you want to max Stevens and Copycat. Second place was Jack. Jack played just a really standard Clam Pearl Gorebyss deck. He's a big fan of that grass energy too. I think usually about 50-50. I think about half of them play it, half of them don't. The Pokemon lineup, super standard for him. The trainer lineup, I think, was a little bit interesting. You can see he did go with 3 Warp Point. Probably a little worried about some of those stall decks, maybe like a Beedrill, maybe like a Credelli deck, something like that. But he did take, and he also played 1 ATM Rock here. Jack's always been a big fan of ATM Rock in general. But I think he did take a few cuts in his consistency to do that. You see he dropped a Master Ball here, and then I think he dropped a Desert Ruins, only that single copy of Desert Ruins, and then I think he went a little low on the supporters too. What did he play? 4, 8, 10, 12, 14, so I guess not too low on it. But yeah, that was one thing that we also saw in the finals with Jack, is he just got, there was just some situations where he drew a little bit rough. I love that he played the 4 Stevens, 4 Copycat. Jack's a big fan of Desert Shaman too. He seems to play that in a lot of his decks. That 2-2-2 split with Shaman, Expedition, and TV Reporter seems a little unusual, but I also get where you're going to hedge your bets, or where you'd want to hedge your bets with maybe Shaman, TV Reporter. Personally, I'm a big fan of just seeing all those cards, seeing the 4 versus 3 with Shaman versus TV Reporter, but multiple expeditions can be a problem if you're not shuffling your deck. So I can see where the 2-2-2 split came from. Third was Jason. This one was always interesting to me. I kind of get curious to see what Jason would bring to this, because to be honest with you, I've never seen Jason play a game in 2004. So I wasn't sure if he was going to show up with maybe some sort of meme deck, or if he was going to play something super competitive. And he did. He showed up with something really competitive. And essentially what Jason did here is he shaved everything in the Pokemon lineup besides Blaziken, Delcatty, and then the Dittos. Didn't play a Blossom, didn't play a Manectric, no Magneton, nothing like that. And then he threw some extra spots into the energy lineup. 13 Fire, 3 Warp. I love the 3 Warp in this deck. I'm going to say I think 16 energy might be a little high, but I definitely, in my Blaziken list, like the one that I posted right before the tournament, I played 12 Fire, 2 Warp. I think I would definitely do 12 Fire, 3 Warp. Warp Energy is just so good. Um, his everything in his Pokemon lineup looked good. Like his trainer lineup, like he had everything in there that you would want to play in a Blaziken deck. For techs, like he had the ATM Rock, he had the Shaman, the Nurse, the Town Volunteers. The only thing, the 4 Candy, 3 Friend Ball, 1 Switch, like all of this, I think is just perfect. The only thing that seemed a little weird to me was the 3 Stevens Advice. I think you have to max the Stevens. And then we did see in his game against Jack where those Oracle, he was drawing the Oracles but not the Delcatties. And he got into some weird situations with that. I do think there's some really, really good arguments to play Underground Expedition in this deck. I think for consistency, I think you can play like a combination of Underground and Oracle. But when you go really heavy on the Oracle, you can find yourself in those situations like unfortunately Jason did in that game. I'm going to say, though, Jason also played more heavily towards the Oracle than maybe a lot of Blaziken decks do, because he did play those extra energy in the energy lineup, so he'd be more likely to have those energy to energy draw with, make sure he gets his manual attachments in. The other thing that kind of stuck out to me, and this isn't uncommon, but he went the 4-2-4 Blaze with the 2 Blaziken EX. This just seemed, for me, this always feels a little bit bad because you're essentially playing 6 cards that evolve from 4. But at the same time, too, I really understand that wanting to have that 4th Blaziken from Ruby Sapphire and also really wanting the 2nd Blaziken EX. But I do think if you were really looking for a spot to cut here, like you really wanted to fit in a Blossom or something, I do think you can make a cut in this section here, too. All right, 4th was Ultan, another Team Magma deck. He went pretty different from Robin, too. I think he did a lot of the same similar stuff. I think he cut in energy here. Yeah, so instead of playing, he basically played the same thing, but he played 1 less fighting. He added 1 fighting energy and played no rainbows in it. So that's what the difference in that. I think the Pokemon lineup was exactly the same. He played the exact same lineup as Robin. And then his supporter lineup, I think, was very, very different than Robin's. Had the 4 Copycat, 4 Stevens. He did opt to play the 13 supporters. I do like that a lot. I think you want that consistency. But I'm going to say the 2 Desert Shaman, like I've never been a fan of it in the deck. But I can also see where, like, if you're putting a lot of early pressure on your opponent, they're not really getting that Delcatty, or you're trying to get Gorebyss to miss something, I can see where that would be really good. Shaman is just a little bit rough in a deck where I think if you're not playing those 14, 15 supporters and you're playing a lower count of it to try to shuffle your hand in, draw 4, and always guarantee you're going to hit something with it. He played, now this is interesting too, he played 2 Briny, 2 Switch. Yeah, I think that's a little interesting. I think you can make good arguments for Switch. I think you can make good arguments for Brinies. I've always preferred Brinies a little bit. I think Robin did too, but yeah, you can definitely make this argument. And then this is another interesting thing. He went 2 Conspirator, 4 Magma Ball. Usually you get 4 Conspirator, 2 Magma Ball, but I'm assuming he was thinking he was pretty heavy on the supporter lineup. He wanted to switch this around a little bit. Personally, I'm a big fan of Robin's, the 4 and the 3. I think that's really good. But I also understand where the line of thinking for this is, and maybe it played really well for him. He went with 1 Maxi. I do like the 1 Maxi in there. I think I would have liked to have seen in Robin's deck as well. I think you can make the argument that if you play really carefully, you don't need the Maxi. But I think you can find yourself in a lot of situations where the Maxi is also really good. And I think it's probably worth the 1-of spot in the deck. 1 Strength Charm, just for the Gorebyss matchup. I know the Gorebyss deck that he beat in the top 8 commented that the Strength Charm was kind of a pain. Did cost him in some situations. And then he plays 3 Desert Ruins. This is up from the standard 2, but I also get that line of thinking. A lot of non-EX decks, or a lot of EX decks are playing maybe 1, maybe 2 stadiums. Ultan's just going with the line of thought. He's like, hey, I'm going to play 3 Desert Ruins. That Desert Ruin's going to stick. And if you're playing an EX deck, I am going to just start hammering you with that damage from Desert Ruins. 5th was Jake. Jake reached out, said he basically copied the BLG list from the video that I posted, and then he switched the reversal count and the warp point count in the deck, and then he switched the ball count around. I think I went 2 Masters, 1 Friend, 1 fastball, and he went 3 master, 1 lure. The lure does seem a little unusual to me, but the comment that he made is he said, well, if I prize Gorebyss, I want to be able to get it back really quickly. So I don't know, maybe he's had some bad, rough situations where he's prizing Gorebyss a lot. Switching the warp and the reversal counts, I get it. At the same time, like, so with the deck, you're basically just saying, hey, I'm going to prize rush you to 6 prizes. So I'm going to, I don't care what prize I'm taking, I'm just taking prizes every turn. You want to try to waste a turn to go sudden flash, something like that, it's not going to pan out well for you. I get that line of thinking. I think reversal can be very disruptive. I can think it can be very, like, it can really destroy your opponent's setup. So that's where I like the 4 reversal, 2 warp, but I can definitely see the line of thinking for the 4 warp, 2 reversals. Other than that, just not a whole lot to talk about. I think I covered it pretty well in the video. He did split the Chinchou line. Always something you can do with the basics if you think you might need one basic over the other. Definitely something to think about. And showed some love for Bennett, so you can't say anything bad about that at all. 6th was a Canadian muck deck. Pretty standard muck deck all around. The one thing that he did different than a lot of muck decks is he opted to play 12 grass. In a lot of mucks, you're going to see 15, 16 grass. And basically what he's kind of saying is he's like, hey, I have a slightly lower chance of opening with a grass energy, or I might miss some energy drops throughout the game, but I'm going to add some cool text into the deck. And I think what he opted to play is he opted to play 2 full heals in the deck. And then, yeah, everything else looks really standard in this. I think he played 2 full heals. I think he added a dual ball in there as well. Overall, though, it's just a really, really standard muck deck, just a little bit lower grass energy. And we saw his top 8 game against Jack. He was really close to moving on to the top 4. He would have had a good matchup against Jason in the top 4. Obviously, Jason's a fantastic player, but maybe with a little bit, I don't know. I think if you could work with Muck to somehow get it past that Gorebyss matchup, and I'm not sure what the right answer to that is. Maybe Super Scoop Up, or maybe it is, I don't know, more Potion or Ranberry. But just the Gorebyss matchup is the only thing that really causes the deck problems. It matches up really well against stuff like Blaziken, the random decks like Credilli. Even Team Magma is going to be a pretty solid matchup for you a lot of the time. So, yeah, if you're willing to go down that low in grass, maybe there's a little bit more you could do for the Gorebyss matchup. Obviously, those full heals came in really big for him against Jack, but just wasn't quite enough to get to seal the deal there. 7th is Zaya. Throughout the last couple of weeks, I had sent Zaya quite a few different Blaziken lists I was working on. And this is one of them that I sent him. I think it's within a couple of cards of it. But essentially, this is a deck that I started working on probably 4 or 5 months ago. But the line of thinking with it is you basically play a Blaziken deck, but you play it like Explode. And you essentially just, you have Blaziken with Firestarter, which is awesome. You have a few more techs with like Blaziken EX, stuff like that. You have more upfront damage hitting for 50, but you're still doing that constant 10 spread to everything. You just are playing a deck with more options. And then beyond that, one of the things that I've tested, and I know Zaya tested it too, if you play 2 Ditto, and then this is the tech I am actually really proud of, is that Weakness Guard. If you play 2 Ditto and a Weakness Guard, I think the Gorebyss matchup is pretty close to 50-50. It's not going to auto-win it for you, but I think it is pretty close to 50-50. And beyond that, you've got all the other techs in. I think a Nurse, a Shaman, you have the Switch, ATM Rock, Weakness Guard. I think in the list that I sent him, I think I also played a Town Volunteers in it. I think I had a 2-2 Delcatty in mind. We had talked about switching that. You could play like a 1-1 Delcatty, a 2-1 Delcatty, and the idea with the 2-1 Delcatty is kind of, it takes a little bit from Diego Casaraga's World Championship win, I think in 2017, with Octillery, where essentially you play an extra copy of the basic, which decreases your overall odds of prizing the line, But if you do prize the Delcatty, which should be about 1 in 10 games, you can bench the Skitty, and then as soon as that Delcatty comes out of the prizes, you have instant access to it. Considering the fact you play like 3 Friend Ball, it's not very hard to search the Delcatty out. So it gives you an extra tech spot in the deck for ideally more reward with very little risk. The 4 Blaziken, 1 Blaziken EX is something else that I tested quite a lot as well. But essentially, it just feels bad to play the extra Blaziken EX just for the spots. I'm going to say Muck EX is a much harder matchup, but only playing 1 Blaziken EX. But in a lot of matchups, it plays really, really well. Ruby Sapphire Blaziken, in my opinion, is the best single prize attacker in probably the 2004 format outside of Gorebyss. So I think there's, like I said, I think this is kind of a different way you can play Blaziken. I think it's a really, really strong Blaziken deck. Zaya also went with the Ember Torchic and then the double-edged Skitty to really hedge his bets against Shedinja. I don't think you need to do that. I think just the bench damage and then the Blaziken EX is enough to win that matchup. But Zaya was not going to lose to any shenanigans this weekend, so he went the extra steps on it too. He did opt to play the Blossom. I also think that's really good, especially against Gorebyss, because there's going to be a point in the game where they are going to warp point, and if they go warp point, you need to be able to switch to something they can't one-shot, and usually that is Blossom, so you're not giving up the free prize, and then you can just switch or warp energy the Blossom back to the bench. Once again, I think I would take a page from Jason's book, though. Definitely play a 3rd warp energy in this. If I was playing it or for Zaya in the future, would be my thought on it. And then lastly, we got Mike Reynolds. Mike played just a Magma list, very different from the first 2. He opted for the 4th Zangoose in the Pokemon lineup. Went with a much, much, much lighter energy lineup. Very thin 5 fighting energies. Obviously did well, consistent enough to carry that into the top 8, but man, that would make me nervous only playing 5 fighting. Other than that, just tons of text. 3 ruins, 4 reversals. He's got 2 warp in there. He went with the 4 Magma Ball, 4 Conspirator. So he played, like I said, a smaller energy lineup, but he goes, hey, I'm just always going to get those good starts with the Conspirator, Magma Ball, 4 Stevens, 4 TV Reporter, 2 Maxi. Man, this is low. 8 draw supporters? 8? Man, that's crazy to me. I would definitely, you got to have 4 Copycat in here, and like I said, I like Underground Expedition, but man, Mike, you got 4 Copycat in here. You got to be copying those large hands. Got to be drawing those 10-card hands. But like I said, Mike did very well, made the top 8 with the deck as well. Just completely, really, I think this was probably, it's kind of interesting to see you with 3 Team Magma decks make the top 8, and they all took a little bit from each other. You know, like Mike and Robin both played the 4 reversals. You saw Ultan and Mike both played the 3 Desert Ruins. Robin and Ultan both had the same Pokemon lineups, very similar energy lineups. Mike went very different on that. I think Mike and Ultan both had 2 warp points. So I think one of the crazy things about this format, and one of the things that I like the most, is you can have very successful decks and very good deck lists be 5 to 10 cards off from each other. And I think that was one of the most interesting things I saw from this tournament, was there was definitely some cookie cutter deck lists, which is awesome. I love when I can put a comment, when I can put content out and then somebody's like, that Jay knows what he's talking about. I'm going to just copy this deck list, maybe change 1 card, change 2 cards, show up to a tournament. But when you also have people come in and you have 3 different people decided to play Team Magma, and all 3 showed up with very different Team Magma decks, and all 3 did very well with them. I think that's really cool too. So I don't want this video to get too long. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off there, and hopefully sometime in the near future we're going to take a look at some of the other crazy decks that were played in the tournament. But if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. That helps me out a lot. I love to see how much the channel's grown over the last year, and of course I hope to see you in the next video.